I'm not even gonna look at that.
It's okay.
Okay. So what I would suggest, and I know we can edit this out, so why don't you just introduce yourself as like I'm a new client, and you know,
Okay.
my name is, this is my background, blah, 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 and let's have that, because
Okay.
that could potentially be used as an intro to a podcast. at some
Oh,
point,
okay.
Okay?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So I'll cue you up.
Yeah.
Let me cue you up,
Okay.
okay? So tell me about yourself.
My name is Christine Knight, and I have a master's degree in counseling, but chose not to go the talk therapy route because that's not what worked for me in my own healing of childhood developmental trauma. What worked for me was hypnotherapy and internal family systems, which is a psychotherapy model, but is non-pathologizing, which means it's not based on medical diagnosis of mental health illness or disease. It instead focuses on the subconscious mind and inner parts, subpersonalities in the ego states within the subconscious mind, getting to know them, root causes of core beliefs, and then healing those inner wounds. Those are the two techniques that help me heal, so that's what I decided to focus on in my career.
So you're living proof that this stuff actually works.
I am living proof, yeah.
And so what got you interested in both of these modalities to begin with?
Yeah, my relentless searching. So it started really, I lived the first half of my life, the first 33 years, in survival strategy mode, thinking I was doing everything right. I was very critical, very judgmental, very sarcastic, but I thought I was doing everything right. I was married, had a child, building a home, had a career, and then divorce happened at the age of 33, and it created what I've now coined the term emotional surge in the inner system that came up again and was overwhelming. So I was literally a robot. I compartmentalized, I dissociated, not realizing I was doing these survival strategies, but that's how I lived my life, thinking I was doing it right. Turmoil hit, my family was shattered, and it brought up all this emotion, created something called PTSD spirals, where there were so many triggers and my nervous system was in such dysregulation that spirals would hit, and whenever they hit, I couldn't be a robot anymore. All the emotions surged up at one time, and I would start crying uncontrollably, shaking, vomiting, and these episodes were happening after my divorce, and I kept trying to get help with talk therapists, trying to find out what's going on, what's wrong. My rage fits, I had rage fits, never with my child, always with a romantic partner. Never at work, always with a romantic partner. And one psychologist who was really good, a good doctor, he told me that because of the origin of my rage, which was an alcoholic, abusive father who beat my mom literally within inches of her life on a few different occasions. He said because of where the rage comes from, I could never cure it. I could only learn coping mechanisms to deal with it in my life. So basically I had to accept this was part of my life and to put coping mechanisms in place and just live with this, I don't know, discomfort, dis-ease. And it infuriated me because he told me no. Number one, I don't like to be told no. And number two, I knew inside, I had an inner knowingness that it didn't have to be this way for the rest of my life. And I knew I was gonna go find it. So, like I tell the story, and I tell people, I leaned forward and I looked at him and I said 2 words, watch me. And then I walked out of his office.
So you took his challenge, if you will. He didn't know that he was giving you a challenge
Yes.
But so I'm curious, was it the divorce that kind of instigated these spirals that you're talking about? Had you searched for help previous to the divorce? Like, had you been in therapy? Had you tried other modalities to deal with some of the experiences that you've had?
I tried, I did not try talk therapy before my divorce. I tried reading books because there were triggers that would set me off. For example, I couldn't watch TV because something would come on a commercial or a movie preview or something like that would come on, and anytime there was violence or a woman screaming or a child screaming, I would lose it. Like, I would lose it. I would dive across the living room, grabbing the remote control and trying to shut the TV off as fast as possible because I would lose it. And if I didn't catch it fast enough, if that spiral started, it wasn't like the vomiting and the crying excessively, but it was a psychological spiral that would start where I would zone down. Like, I would go almost into a depressive state, and it would take me a week or two to come out of it. And so I knew this was a trigger, so I tried to have a coping mechanism to bypass it. And my husband thought I was crazy, but really it was just, I had a lot of childhood trauma.
So your earliest recollection of TV or sounds of violence or somebody yelling, had that always been your reaction or your trigger, or did it start later, years later after it had happened and you were grown, or did you react that way early on when you would be in that kind of environment?
In adult life, onset in adult life, and when I was a child and things like that would actually be happening in front of me, I would go into robot mode where I didn't panic, but I had like no emotion. So I would just look at the surroundings, what's going on, what can I do, can I make him happy fast enough that he subsides? Sometimes that worked. Do I need to just take my little sister and hide her? Do I need to, like, never call the cops, like, never. But what could I do in the situation to get through it and alleviate it, especially for my younger sister? Like, how could I alleviate it? So it was a different mode.
How old were you during some of these, earlier memories that you have?
3, 4, 5.
Had it occurred to you to call the police?
No.
Were you told not to call the police?
No, but we were told that what happens at home stays at home,
Don't tell anybody.
And you don't want to make him mad.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Never occurred to me to call the police. Till I saw him do it. I actually saw it. The worst memory, the worst night of my life that kind of stuck with me. Viola Davis wrote a book just recently, a memoir called Finding Me, and she talks about Will Smith had asked her a question, like in the beginning of her book. He had asked her a question about like the driving memory of her life, and she had never thought about it. And she went back to her memory, and when I was reading that, I was like, oh, as soon as you asked me the question, I know right where my memory goes back to, and it was that night.
Right.
Yeah. So it's amazing that, like, it anchors in. Like, now I know all of this research and explanations of everything, and it anchors in, and then the core belief is so strong that you start driving your life from that, which is what originally started my pattern. My pattern played out from my original trauma was in romantic relationships. That's why I was a great mom, raised my kid great, but romantic relationships, 5 marriages, 5 divorces, and started from 16, over 30 years, 5 divorces, because I kept choosing the same kind of perpetrator to play out the original trauma. So that's what happens with inner wounds. The inner wound will keep searching for a person similar to the abuser, the original perpetrator, so that it can have a do-over, number one, and have a different outcome, or it can play out the trauma with a similar type person and have that person accept you and heal the wound. That's what the wound is looking for. It's looking to be healed, either through a do-over with different results, or acceptance and love from that person who didn't accept and love you in the first place.
Right.
So I kept playing it out over and over again.
So is it safe to assume that none of the partners were able to help you heal?
Correct.
Because they were similar to the perpetrator who was your dad?
They were narcissistic, abusive,
alcoholic
men. The first one, like my first marriage, I tell people I jumped out of the fire, or out of the frying pan and into the fire.
Okay.
Abusive, alcoholic. Not to the point that my dad was abusive. Like, he didn't beat me within inches of my life. He wouldn't even hit my face. But he would, like, lock me in closets, lock me in the basement, hog tie me in front of his friends, and do things to me. Like, abusive, emotionally abusive, physically abusive. He would hit me and throw me across the room and stuff, but he would never hit my face.
And that was familiar to you because that's what you had grown up watching and being a part of.
Because my dad made us watch what he did. So when it happened with me in my first marriage, I was accepting it, but I was maneuvering around it. So I would go stay at my friend's house, and I was in high school. I would go stay at my friend's house, at her family's house, when I knew he was drinking. I could call him and talk to him for a half a second and know if he was drinking or not. And if he was, I would just go to my friend's house and stay overnight. And I'd be gone for days, and he never would even miss me because he was just blitzed.
So you were able to remove yourself from that situation the older you got.
I had to finish high school. I was determined to finish high school because my dad told me that I wouldn't.
So watch me. Which ended up being fuel to help motivate me. Otherwise, I probably would have dropped out of high school because it was very stressful. But I made it through to the end of high school, was supposed to go to college. That was our agreement, that he would support me in going to college, and I got a scholarship to go to college. And when it came time for that, he didn't want me to go to college. He wanted me to have a baby and start a family instead. So we started trying to get pregnant. So 6 months, actually 5 months after I graduated high school, I was trying to get pregnant with this guy. And he did all the promises. I'll stop drinking, I'll go to AA and all this. And I realized, I believed him. Totally, naive. But I believed him until I started seeing signs of it again. And then when I realized he was drinking again and just hiding it very well, I left. How old were you then?
18. And I could have been pregnant. I didn't know because we were trying. What really got me to leave at that point was I refused to bring a child into the environment that I was raised in. And that's because when I left with no money, threw my clothes in my car and slept in my car, and then started trying to find places to sleep on couches and stuff, and then finally got an apartment.
Do you have any happy memories of your dad?
Man, he taught me a lot. He was a smart man. He dropped out of high school to take care of his mother, but he was a smart man, well-read, and he was really great when he wasn't around my mom. So he was a truck driver at one point in my life, and he took me on the road with him for a week. One of the best memories of my entire life. We got along great. We talked about stuff. He took care of me. He nurtured me. There was one time in the middle of the night, and we were sleeping in the truck, and I got up in the middle of the night, and I had to go to the bathroom. I could not hold it. So he drove around trying to look for a bathroom, couldn't find one. So he made a makeshift Like he got a 5-gallon bucket and put a plastic trash bag inside of it and draped it over and made a makeshift toilet and put it in the trailer for me. So and a flashlight. So I went in there and went to the bathroom, and then he tied it up and threw it like in a dumpster, and I never felt more cared for in my life. And I was 13 maybe? I think I was 13. Yeah. Or collecting seashells. We went on a trip one time down to Florida, and we got up early and we're walking on the beach, just the two of us, and collecting seashells. Yeah, he was a different person. I think there was a lot of stuff going on in my parents' relationship that we didn't know about.
Yeah, well, because you mentioned that he was a different person when your mother wasn't around. You didn't say he was a different person when he wasn't drinking. So was it the drinking that put him over the edge and turned him abusive, or was it the relationship or lack of relationship with your mother in your thoughts, if what you can remember about what was going on at that time?
Yeah, it was the drinking that caused the beatings. Yeah. Because the memories that are good with him are later on, after the age of 12, like 12 to 14, because he got religious and he joined this church that was very strict: no smoking, no drinking, no cussing, and a very connected church and a very active church. Like there was Bible study 1 or 2 nights a week. There was like trips that you took together. There was youth sporting groups, like sports leagues within the church, because it was so big. It was like a cult-like church. But it was great because there were rules that I didn't like you couldn't do anything Friday night anymore, because they kept the Sabbath day, Friday evening to Saturday evening. They kept Hebrew laws, and you couldn't celebrate any holidays anymore. No Christmas, no Easter, nothing like that. But he quit smoking immediately, cold turkey, and he quit drinking. And yeah, that's when I had a lot better memories of him. He still would have, he was like, to pathologize it, bipolar, where he would just flip and you wouldn't know when it was coming. So I always tried keeping him happy, because I was very connected with him, daddy's little girl, where my brother and sister were more kind of connected with my mom. So
what's your birth order?
I'm the middle child.
You're the middle child. So who's older than you?
My brother is older, my sister's younger.
Right.
And my brother and I were really close, because we're only like a year and a half, not even a year and a half apart. So we were really close growing up.
It's interesting that, typically a dad would get close to a son, and you were saying that you were so close to him, and, even like as a teenager, that's when, I remember pulling back from my parents, right? They embarrassed me, I don't want to be around them, and it probably happened at about 12 or 13 years old. And so here for you, you were able to get closer to your father at that point, and it sounds like maybe the stopping of the drinking and the church kind of gave him a different outlook on life. Yeah, he had direction finally, instead of spiraling. Because now I know that drinking is a survival strategy used by a firefighter part. That when the emotional surge comes up, a firefighter part is reactive and will do anything to get that emotion to go back down, annihilate everything, knee-jerk reaction to get that emotion to go down. So you're talking about a firefighter, so talk a little bit more about that. Help me understand what that means.
So in the internal system, in the internal family systems model, the system is made up of protector parts and the inner child parts. So the inner child parts are very young, stuck in the past. They're the ones that hold the inner wound, and that's where the emotion comes from, that loneliness, that unworthiness, that shame, that sadness. That emotional surge comes from those inner wound that's being held by the inner child parts. So we call those parts exile parts, because whenever trauma happens in our usually in our childhood, it can happen in adulthood, but usually in childhood, trauma is really defined as anything that's overwhelming. It's emotionally overwhelming to us, and we don't know how to handle it, and we can't process through it, and there's nobody there to really help us process through it, and we usually internalize it. As children, we're the center of our universe, and we think that everything's our fault, or we're even told it's our fault. But even if we're not told that, we think that creates that inner wound that gets stuck there. Well, the protective parts come in. They're parts of the ego state in our mind, which helps us survive. It's human evolution to have survival strategies and coping strategies so that you can make it to the next moment, next year's, reproduce, whatever. That's instinctual. So these parts are already within us, but they were meant for different things. They were meant to be like searching for opportunities or looking for ideas or being innovative and inventive. Well, when trauma happens, these protector parts have to take on extreme roles, extreme jobs to make sure that we can survive. And the naive, innocent, loving, forgiving, child-like parts don't have what it takes to move forward in survival, because the protector parts fear that they would be, pretty much demolished, annihilated, because they're so precious, they're innocent. So the protector parts come in, take on these extreme jobs, and they're like, this is the strategy to help us survive. This is the strategy to help us survive, and then they exile those inner child parts out of the system. We're going to shove you aside, put you in the basement, in the dungeon, lock you up, put you in a box where you can't have this emotional surge that prohibits us surviving. So survival parts, or protector parts, use survival coping strategies. Manager parts are proactive. We're going to control the environment. We're going to make sure everything is in the right spot. We're going to make people happy. We're going to people please. We're going to do things constantly. We're going to get a lot of letters after our name. That is one of my things. We're going to go to school, be good in school. We're going to achieve great things. We're going to do things to create worth and value in us, because the trauma created the belief that we didn't have worth and value in just being us.
Right.
We have to do things to protect. So proactive parts are manager parts, trying to control our environment so that we don't get triggered, so that those inner child parts don't get triggered down in there, and that emotional surge doesn't happen.
Right.
So they're like always like this, looking out, looking around, controlling the environment. But ultimately, life happens. So no matter how hard they try, proactively, something's going to happen that's going to trigger that emotional surge in that child part. And that emotion's going to come up. When that does, the other type of protector part is a firefighter part. They are reactive instead of proactive. They stay kind of in the background. You don't see them until the trigger happens, and then they react, knee-jerk reaction. They come in and we call them firefighters because they use the axe on the front door, kicking the front door. They're like spraying their fire hoses all over the house, destroying furniture, and there's just a candle burning on the kitchen counter. They feel the emotional surge and they annihilate whatever they have to get that emotion to go back down. This is where a lot of addictions happen, dissociation, where that was I called it my superpower. One of my superpowers, I would just dissociate, go away. What's some other ones? There's a lot.
But was that
rage?
Was that really a superpower, or was that a repression? It sounds like, of your emotions. Like, in other words, you wouldn't allow it to come up. And so talk a little bit about that.
For me, so I started calling dissociation my superpower when I started learning what it was and why it was, and it was my way of accepting that part of me before I found internal family systems. And you're right, it is a repression, but almost it's more than that. So you feel emotions in your body. Emotions are just messages that come through your body. Your body's a messenger service to say, hey, something's not right. Something's really great. Something's not right. I'm worried about something. This could be a red flag. It's just a message. Emotions are just messages. So I would leave my body completely, so I wouldn't feel emotions. And I cried like maybe 3 times from the age of 13 to 33. Like, I know at the age of 13 when I shut my emotions down. I didn't start being able to feel emotions again until 2015. So I was like, I don't even know how old I was, 40, something around there. And whenever I started feeling the emotions, so I was like a robot. So when
autopilot.
Yeah, just doing, not feeling at all.
Right.
But in that, I wasn't able to really connect with people either. So when I started feeling emotions in 2015, I had to learn what they were. I had to learn the language for emotions, and then I had to learn how to process them. And I felt like I was like 3 years old with emotions. They were just the smallest emotion would be very overwhelming to me, and I didn't know how to process it. I actually had to learn that. So, and I didn't find, I had found hypnotherapy in 2012. But a very deep state, like transpersonal hypnotherapy, which is like past life regressions, life between life reviews, things like that, where you're examining your current life, but from an overarching view, so that you get better understanding of it. And it helped me a lot get better understanding of it.
What made you look into that at that stage of your life? Why not sooner? Was there something that, kind of triggered that, for lack of a better word?
So 2008 was the divorce that caused all of this muck to come up from the past. I pretty much stayed drunk for a year, almost killed myself by getting pneumonia. I worked myself to death and drank myself to death. Anytime I didn't have my kid in that year, I was drinking, and I mean drunk. Within a year, I got pneumonia and almost died from pneumonia, because I was just go, because I was in robot mode and had to keep going and numbing the emotions to make it through. Or so I thought. It's just because I didn't have help. I didn't have guidance back then. If I had, it would have saved me a lot of trouble. So 2009, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna treat myself well. I'm gonna recreate my life. I'm gonna build it. I went back to school to finish my bachelor's degree in 2009. I was going to different therapists, and that's when that psychologist told me that I couldn't be cured. So from 2009 to 2012, I was searching other therapists, books, like anything that kind of resonated with me. I would try it. But all this time, I was still having these spirals. In 2012, I was sitting on my couch folding laundry in the morning, like a Saturday morning, because I was in college at the time, and I was watching PBS, because it was the only thing I could watch on TV back then that didn't have commercials. Like now there's streaming, which is awesome, which I'm okay now. I can see things and it doesn't trigger me. But I was watching PBS, and Wayne Dyer was on the stage talking. You Can Do It conference or something like that. And he was talking about a healing session that he had in a past life regression session with this woman. And brought the woman up on the stage, and she walked across the stage and started talking about it. And as soon as I saw her, I'm telling you, as soon as I saw her, I knew she was the one that was going to cure it. The spirals.
Wow. Wow. I just
Yeah.
got goosebumps when you said that.
I
Like I
knew
felt it.
It took 3 years before that happened, but as soon as I saw it, I knew it. So he gave her email address at the end of the show. I emailed her. Didn't hear anything back for 3 months because she was in New York. I was in Columbus, Ohio. She emailed back 3 months later and said she was going to be in Chicago at this hotel and I could book a session. And it was $800 back then, back in 2012. I was a single mom, no child support, in college finishing my degree and working. Well, just so happens that the universe comes in and provides. So I was working in California, like for my job, traveling back and forth. So on the trip back, when she emailed back, I booked the hotel in Chicago, I booked the session with her, and I had to go to California. So on the way back, I took a layover in Chicago, got the hotel, and I did a 24-hour layover. So I saved the company money because the layover was 24 hours. It actually made the plane ticket less. It made it enough to cover the hotel room.
Oh boy.
So my company agreed to basically pay for my hotel and my flight
Right.
to Chicago. So all I had to pay was the $800, which I felt that back then. Believe me, I was like, ooh, but it was so worth it.
What is this woman's name?
Her name is Mira Kelly. So she's in California now. She used to be an attorney in New York, and she left that life and
Wow.
does healing work now. Different kinds of stuff than I do. But yeah, she's in California, still doing kind of healing work, and like teaching manifestation and stuff like that. So whenever the session was done, the session was phenomenal. It's supposed to be like a past life regression that then you connect with like your subconscious and your superconscious and get healing, physical healing, or psychological healing in my circumstance. So at the end of the session was phenomenal. I never went to a past life. I went like right to like soul parents. I called them soul parents. There was 3 of them, guides, where I was when I got the call to come here, like the overarching theme. Because one of my questions was, why did I choose my parents? Why did I choose to grow up like that? And I already knew I was here to help people. And I was like, I should have had an easy childhood filled with love and nurture so that it would be easy for me to give that to other people. Why did I choose a really hard path? So a lot of answers came, overarching themes came, and at the end of the session, I was just blown away. Like I was telling her things about her and her life in that session, which kind of was more proof to me that this was real. So when the session was over, I said, where did you learn how to do this? And she said, Dolores Cannon. It's called Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. Dolores Cannon developed it over about the last 40 years, and she's still teaching it. So I go home, I find Dolores Cannon. She's teaching in person in Arkansas. I fly down to Arkansas for a week and I learned it in 2012. And then I started doing these kinds of sessions for people. And my awareness, my awakening, my spirituality just like took over at that time. But what happened was I was much more spiritual than human. I wanted to be over there because it's awesome. It's awesome over there. And I was getting so many answers. I was meditating, just all the questions that I had had my whole life growing up in religion and just feeling like something's missing, something's not right. Like I was getting all of those answers. So that was 2012. I was still in corporate, climbing the corporate ladder. I got my degree. I switched from finance and my degree to communication, interpersonal communication. It just resonated with me. I don't know why I did it. It put more money and time onto my degree, finishing it, but I didn't know why. I just knew I wanted to do it. So I graduated and then wanted to do social work, wanted to get a master's in social work. But the program was about $50,000, and then you graduate with a master's degree licensed after 4 years, and then you only make like $30,000. I was like, I can't justify that. So I kept fighting that. I kept putting it off and fighting it, and I was still raising my kid, and you know, on my own, trying to save up money for college, and you know, so it just, I was doing the QHHT on the side while also maintaining this is what you should do life.
And the QHHT, that's
is the quantum healing.
Okay.
Yeah, and then COVID hit, and everything aligned. It got me thrown out of corporate because I lost my whole team. I had a whole team by that point. The whole team was demolished because I handled California public entity accounts. So like the schools, firefighters, cops, all them, none of them, especially in California, none of them were at work. So my whole job, I think they hung on for like 6 months, but then the whole job was just completely done away with. So I had an opportunity. I had time, enough money to live on with severance and unemployment. So went back to grad school for counseling and did more intensive study in the quantum healing, the QHHT, and then started doing clinical hypnotherapy. Like I knew that was where I wanted to go. I just had kept putting it off. But in 2020 with COVID, that's also when my kid graduated high school. So a lot of things just like opened up at the same time.
Yeah. Now, I don't recall you saying about your own experience with hypnotherapy. So
with hypnotherapy,
yeah.
So the QHHT is a form of hypnotherapy.
Okay.
That was a huge, just I call it a turbo boost, just trajectory in my life. For whatever 2012 through 2020. So for 8 years, while I was doing sessions for other people on the side, I was also having sessions on me.
Okay.
And you also learn, like you connect in that energy when you're doing that kind of a session. So things were healing in me, helping me heal and stuff too. It was the humanness that I had to still get in touch with. In 2020, when I trained in clinical hypnotherapy, that's when the humanness really started to take hold. Because in clinical hypnotherapy, there's issues that are like laser focused, that you go in like, I'm not able to lose weight. No matter what I do, I can't lose weight. I want to find out why. Or I have this anger that I can't control, and I want to, not have this anger in my life anymore. So I was working on things like that. And then through the parts therapy here, the hypnotherapy with parts therapy, that's a piece, it's a good sized piece of what internal family systems is. So that's where I started to ask. I started to ask, like the universe, like what's more here? There's more healing here. Because in that model, in parts therapy and hypnotherapy, they're basically bypassing protector parts and going to the inner wound. So you heal the inner wound, but then it creates havoc in the system. So if the issue is coming from a protector part, you're golden, it's great. But if the issue is coming from an inner wound and you go in there and heal it without permission of the protector parts, it's going to disrupt your inner system. And things started happening like with clients, like there was, like car accidents, getting sick, getting in the hospital, relationships were breaking up, like there was like havoc happening. So between that I was studying, what's her name? Diane. What's her last name? She has a hyphenated last name. Poole Heller. Diane Poole Heller. So I was studying attachment disorders with her because it was obvious by that time already that my issue was in romantic relationships. My issue was with men, the kind of men I was choosing, the kind of relationships I was having, what was getting played out in the relationships. So I found out about attachment disorders in college, in grad school. So I found Diane Poole Heller. I volunteered at a summit, embodiment. So I think it was like somatic psychology, like somatic embodiment, which is just like learning to connect with your body and reading the emotions and instead of suppressing things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I heard Dick Schwartz for the very first time. And I understood what he was saying. He was talking about internal family systems, the inner system, the different kind of categories of parts that we have, and that's why there's different, almost feels like inner conflict. It feels like angel on one side, devil on the other side of the shoulders. It's a roller coaster. And I was like, this is making a lot of sense. But like the people that he was talking with in the summit didn't seem to be getting it. Like they were almost too enmeshed in psychology and psychotherapy. But I understood it. And I was like, who is this guy? What is going on with this? And he hadn't written No Bad Parts yet. So the things that I was finding, it wasn't resonating, you know? And then he wrote No Bad Parts, and I found out about that book somehow. I don't even remember how I found out about it. But I started reading it, and it changed my life. It changed my life. And my anger part inside was really, the anger part now is called the warrior part. And it was really worried about me healing the anger because it thought that I needed to keep it in place because that's where my power came from. And that if I healed my anger, my power would go away. I wouldn't be able to have boundaries anymore. I wouldn't be able to protect myself. I'd be a welcome mat again, just like I was when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, and it was scared of that. And I got on a Zoom call with Dick Schwartz in this book club with the Trauma Research Foundation that's headed up by Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. Sure. That's a really great foundation. Highly recommend it. And it was like a book club meeting, and I got on the meeting that had Dick Schwartz on it, and I basically was asking his permission to use hypnotherapy inductions to get in the internal system to then use the process of the model internal family systems. So I was asking him, like, what do you think, like, is it one or the other, or can I actually incorporate these two and do these two? And he said, as long as it's client led and you are not directing the conversation between the parts and the system, and it's client led, the client's parts are leading the conversation, the dialogue, then you're doing IFS. Wow. So I was like, that's awesome. So I got his permission. I used clinical hypnotherapy on my anger part, and it did clear it a lot. But there was residual anger still that was in my life that would show up here and there that wasn't healed until I healed the inner wounds using IFS. So here's what happens. We have protector parts and inner child parts. We can go in and unburden, bring some relief to the protector parts to a point, but we have to heal the inner wounds in the inner child part to fully release that extreme role of the protector part. And ultimately that's what I did.
So is the goal to get rid of the protector part?
No, I love them. I love firefighters. I love my warrior part. So the goal is to reveal the parts, acknowledge them, appreciate them for what they do. Like I tell my clients, they have an expert level skill set that they have honed over decades of time that have been used to help your inner system. When we unburden them from extreme rules and we heal the inner wounds and we bring in our core essence, our self-energy, who is truly us, the 8 C's, Dick Schwartz calls them the 8 C's, compassion, connection, clarity, confidence, courage. When we sit in that self-energy and direct our life in connection, the parts learn to trust that and can fully, release their extreme rules, their survival strategies, and can trust self to direct our life. So IFS really helped me because hypnotherapy helped to start unburdening the protector parts, but I wasn't able to integrate it into everyday life, and I didn't know why. And it's because the inner wounds were still there. So IFS came in, healed the inner wounds, revealed the parts, which revealed self-energy, which now has dissipated anger. So the warrior part is still there and shows up. And as soon as it shows up, I feel it. And I'm like, thanks, warrior part. Thanks for showing up. Go do the job that you really want to do. And thanks for alerting me to this. And I'm going to go take care of this other situation in self-energy. With compassion, but courage and confidence. So we still have those parts in us, but they're shifted. Their perspective has shifted. So instead of, I tell people it's like survival strategies is like the horse bridle that has the blinders on. They have to watch for danger everywhere so much that you can't do that in a wide, expanded perception. You have to have a narrow perception because it's perspective, but it's perception because you're looking, you're not calm. So you can only maintain that in a certain area of perspective. So what happens is when we unburden the protector parts, when we heal the inner wounds of the child parts, so they're no longer attracting in these traumas to have the do-overs play out anymore, and it alleviates those extreme roles of the protector parts. They can now do what they were originally supposed to do. They can look for opportunities. They can look for fun. They can be playful. Because those parts are a part of us. So those parts have self-energy inside of them. And as they continue to be unburdened and doing their jobs that they were originally supposed to do, which they know exactly what it is, that self-energy starts to expand inside of those parts, inside of the protector parts.
So it sounds like they're almost repurposed for their original intended use.
Yeah.
But they had to protect you from your wounds, and so they weren't able to do their original function, which is the creativity, the excitement, the clarity, the courage. Wow.
Yeah, so then they become blocked because it takes a lot of energy and effort to continue to do those jobs over and over throughout the entire day. Looking for triggers or reacting to triggers. Looking for danger.
We were on high alert
all the time.
Always looking for what is the next danger that's going to come to protect us.
Yes. Which that's why I bring in my other studies that I've done in neuroscience, the nervous system regulation, the polyvagal theory. Stephen Porges talks about nervous system regulation. So when you're always looking danger, your nervous system is dysregulated because it's on high alert. So we can't be calm. We can't be relaxed. We can't have the feeling of being in a safe environment. And it's necessary, what's his name? Epigenetics, Bruce Lipton. Dr. Bruce Lipton, has studied epigenetics, DNA reconstruction, okay? He has proven in a lab that in different environments, your DNA restructures.
Wow.
Yeah. So you have to have a regulated nervous system, feeling as if you're in a calm and safe environment to do two things: learn new things and heal. Heal psychologically and heal physically. That's why we need sleep. We have to have sleep because that's when our nervous system is regulated and we can actually heal. And Bruce Lipton also found two things actually changes the structure of DNA, and that's gratitude and forgiveness, which kind of go hand in hand. Forgiveness, people throw that word around, and I struggled with that word for decades. And now I define forgiveness as acceptance of what happened. Accepting what happened instead of wanting it to be different. Pain and struggle come in our life when we want something to be different, which comes from judgment. We judge it and think that it should be different. I shouldn't have been raised in that environment. They shouldn't have treated me that way. He shouldn't have treated her that way. That judgment. I wanted it to be different.
Right.
And then when I just accepted that is what happened, it resulted in these inner wounds in me. So I needed to turn. We call it a U-turn in IFS. You do a U-turn inside and you face it and you heal it. You accept it. To me, that's forgiveness.
So when you talk about forgiveness, it sounds like it's self-forgiveness.
That's really insightful. Yeah.
Like it's not, and not that that doesn't happen, but it's not necessarily forgiving the other person. It's forgiving yourself for wanting it to be different and resisting it, rather than, you can't change the past, right? And so allowing it to be and accept that that is what happened allows the healing to happen. I'm curious, are you able to feel your feelings now?
Fully. Can fully sit in them.
Wow.
Yeah. And I can feel when I become blended. So if I have let's say I have a surge of, romantic relationships, it's just, that's my trailhead, you know. So trailheads in IFS, we call it trailheads because that's the surge, that's the emotional, which is my term, that's the emotional surge coming up, creating that reaction, that trigger.
Okay.
So that's where we know the inner wound is. That's where the pain is. So we call that the trailhead because that's where we want to dive in.
Okay.
Like for decades, especially in romantic relationships, I had avoided conflict. You know, I don't want to talk about anything. I don't want to be criticized about anything because I just can't take it. And now I'm like, oh, there's conflict. This is awesome. Like,
Because
yay.
you know there's growth and healing because it's bringing something up for you.
Yes, because now I know it's actually about me and what's being triggered in me to cause the emotional surge.
Right.
Ultimately, that's what I need to look at, and that's what I need to heal.
Yeah.
One. And number two is now I approach conflict in self-energy, in my core essence, unblended from that part. So let's say there's that part that's scared. I'm scared he's gonna hurt you. He's gonna be like all the others and he's gonna hurt you. I say, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for showing up and telling me that. Tell me more. Why are you worried? What's wrong? That goes to an inner wound. I was not in control of my dad's actions. I could not help. I was helpless. And I felt I wasn't worthy of him being different. Ultimately, that's where the pain's coming from. So I address that, number one. I'm in self-energy when I approach, say, my boyfriend and talk about, hey, I really need consistency from you. You know, like I didn't have consistency from my dad. I didn't have consistency in other relationships. And I know that it is my thing, but having consistency with you will help me really build trust and connection with you, you know, and so this is what I'm requesting. Are you able to do this, or is there anything I can do to help you do this, or can we find some other solution to build this?
But
Isn't that, you feel that difference?
Yeah.
Then, you know what, you told me, because this is the part talking. You told me you were gonna call me and let me know, and I made dinner and you never called me and let me know, and I'm just sitting here waiting.
Right.
What kind of response is that gonna get?
Sure.
Because we're social creatures. Humans are social creatures. We actually co-regulate. And Stephen Porges in polyvagal theory talks about this. We co-regulate. So if I come at you in self-energy, this is what's going on inside of me, and you could really help me out with that if you do that. You're going to co-regulate with that energy, because our nervous systems actually connect with each other. But if I'm talking from my part, so Dick Schwartz says we want to be in self-energy and talk for our parts, not from our parts.
Okay.
Talking from our parts is the part blends, jumps on you, it's like all over you. Self can't see straight because it's like an octopus. It's like all over your head, blinding you. And the part is like, rah, 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 rah.
Right.
You said you would do this and you didn't do this and you're awful.
Right.
It's gonna co-regulate. So that part is going to activate the part within that person's system. Could be anger, could be defensiveness, could be avoidance, could be shutdown, dissociation. That part's going to be activated, and that's how that person's going to come back on you.
So you have to know what you want or need
First.
and then you have to be vulnerable enough to ask for it.
Yeah. Speak for your parts.
Right.
Yeah.
And be willing to risk a negative response.
Yes.
No, I can't do that.
Yeah.
This is your problem, you figure it out.
Yeah.
So then you're rejected or you're not heard. So it's courage to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, it takes courage, but that's one of the 8 C's
Right.
of self-energy.
Right.
Because self knows that if that person has that reaction, that they don't care enough about me to help nurture or build a connection or even have a conversation about it. I know that that's their part. But that gives me more data to make a decision. Do I want to continue in whatever kind of relationship this is with this person? Could be a working relationship, co-worker, business opportunity, lover, spouse.
Right.
That gives me the data. Then do I want to continue? Because I've already had trauma relationships. I've already had trauma bonds.
Yeah.
I've healed those ones. I don't need that wound anymore.
Right.
So if it would be a reaction that, they say, well, that's your problem. You're going to have to figure that out. Do I really want to continue with this person?
No. Run.
What I have found is that when I just stay true in self-energy, stay true to myself, and stay authentic, I actually don't have to do anything. They fall off.
Ah.
They just
They like self-exit almost.
self-exit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because people in trauma and wanting to have that trauma, recreate that trauma from their inner wounds,
Right.
won't be able to stand being calm and not engaged with. They won't be able to stand it. And they'll exit.
So we all have our own wounds and trauma, and if we haven't healed them and done the work, we're going to continue to attract the people, the experiences that are going to bring us back there. So if we don't heal them, they're just going to keep showing up.
Yeah. So sometimes people ask me, well, how do I know if I have inner wounds? And I say, just look at your patterns. What keeps showing up in your life? Or what keeps driving you crazy? Or no matter how hard you try, like, you keep saving money and saving money and saving money and doing really good, but then, man, every single time something happens and wipes me out, and I have to start all over again. Inner wound.
Self-sabotage.
But the inner wound will create the circumstance in your life.
Right.
Illness, divorce, it'll create whatever it needs to create.
Right.
To have that trauma happen over again in the hopes of a savior coming, in the hopes that there's a redo and the healing will happen. It's inevitable.
Fascinating.
Because we create our own reality.
Right.
Ultimately.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this before somebody else does it. Let me ruin it, because I know it's gonna get ruined anyway.
Yeah, that's abandonment. Yeah.
I'm familiar.
Yeah. Yes, it's just fascinating work. And even though I've healed the major inner wounds that I had from childhood, there's still things that pop up, because it's like what Dick Schwartz calls it, like an onion where you're peeling the layers. And I look at it like a bloom, like a flower that's closed up, and we peel back each petal. We just open it up and open it up and open it up until we get to that place in the inside, that has that sweet nectar, where then the bee can come and get the nectar and spread it around to others. So that's kind of my visual, is more like a flower. But there's still my flower is open now, my heart is open, which 10 years ago I thought that never would happen, and it's fully open. But there's still things that come up I know my trailhead is romantic relationships, so there are still things that come up in that area of my life that I'm just like, okay, I'm blended. So when I get blended, I need, and I think most people need, to just step away and kind of just recenter. And I take that opportunity to talk with that part. Hey, what's going on? But there's even times that's not in a romantic relationship for me. Like, there was an episode, a situation that happened a few weeks ago. I was out with friends dining, and a table next to ours, there was a little bit of an altercation with the lady sitting next to my friend, and the lady got mad and shoved her chair into the back of my friend's chair. Now, 10 years ago, that would have been over. I would have been up.
Put up your dukes. I want to fight you.
There would have not conversation. I would have been up and been physical with that woman, because that's a trigger. She's a bully, physically aggressive. Ding, ding, ding. That's my dad. I'm gonna go and take control of the situation right now from my part blending with me, because of that inner wound that felt that helpless feeling.
Right.
That's what it's all about. So the woman slams her chair into the back of my friend's and stands up, which is another
Aggressive.
Yeah. My warrior part was like, woof, like right here, like, let me at her, let me at her, let me at her. And I said, thank you, warrior part. Give me a second. Let's see how this plays out. And I thanked it for showing up. And it's like, well, I'm here. All you got to do is say the word. You say the word. And I'm like, you are so awesome. Like, I love that I have you just underneath the surface. Thank you so much. You rock. And I hadn't seen it in like a year, but it popped up. And I was like, thank you, but wait, we're going to stay in self-energy right now. We're going to watch this play out. And the woman, like, I looked over at her, and my friend stayed seated and my other friend stayed seated. Like, and I don't know if they were in self-energy, because they're both kind people, or if they have avoidance, or if they have freeze, I don't know what's going on in them, but they stayed seated. And the lady, I turned and looked at the lady, and she like said, oh, sorry. And then she stopped and said, oh, really, I am sorry. So again, so much in life we actually don't have to interact with. If we stay in self-energy, it works itself out.
Wow.
Even in business,
Wow, that's heavy.
it works itself out. But self-energy was sitting there in courage and confidence, ready to stand up and have a conversation with this woman.
It almost makes me think that we are going to parties that we were never invited to.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Like, who asked you to come in?
That's
Like,
a
this
great
is my stuff.
I love that.
And you're coming in and, like, either calling me out or, you know, interacting with me when I'm in this part that I didn't even realize that I was in before. So we don't have to go to parties that we're not invited to. Yeah.
And the warrior part was fine because the trust has already been built between self-energy and that part. So the warrior part watched it play out. It was fine, great, okay.
Yeah.
Goes back down.
So it was ready, but it wasn't needed. It didn't need to be called up. It didn't need to be called into action, if you will. But I guess there's some comfort knowing that someone or some part has your back.
But even then, I would have stayed in self-energy and had a conversation with this woman from self-energy, trying to co-regulate her nervous system.
Right. Kill them with kindness.
Yeah. But that can be used as a survival strategy and not from self-energy. So see how the same thing
Yes.
can have different origin points.
Yeah. Depending upon
There are
which way
people
you're
pleaser
looking at it.
parts
Yeah.
who don't want to make anybody mad.
Mhm.
I have to be accepted. I have to make everybody happy. That's different. Yeah. Where self-energy is like, I have the courage, I have the confidence, I am going to tell you my boundaries, and I expect you to respect them.
Yeah.
And you can say it even firm like that in self-energy, and have the person be like, oh yeah, it's probably going to be received completely different.
And I think in order to have that self-energy, we have to know thyself, and we have to accept ourselves, and we have to love ourselves, as opposed to the I'm not good enough, which would quiet me and not want me to even say anything. Because who am I to have an opinion about what you just did?
That's why we have to heal our inner systems. IFS.
Christine Knight. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's an honor. Yeah, that's really good. How long?
I have no idea, but I have to go to the bathroom.
11:52.
An hour and 7 minutes.
Oh wow.
Oh gosh.